I stared at the pregnancy test on our kitchen counter, my hands trembling as my wife beamed at me with an expression I hadn't seen in months. Victoria's eyes sparkled with genuine joy, but all I felt was a cold knot forming in my stomach. "Isn't it wonderful, Daniel? We're finally going to be parents," she exclaimed, reaching for my hand. I pulled back instinctively. "Victoria, we need to talk." Her smile faltered. "What's wrong? I thought you'd be happy. We've talked about having children." "We've talked about a lot of things," I said carefully, my mind racing through the calculations I'd been doing for weeks. "But we haven't exactly been intimate lately." The color drained from her face. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." I walked to the calendar hanging on our refrigerator, the one where I'd been meticulously tracking our lives. The last time we were together was 4 months ago. That weekend in the mountains, remember? The one you cut short because of that emergency at work. Victoria's jaw tightened. "You're tracking our sex life on a calendar? That's sick, Daniel." "No, what's sick is that you're standing here trying to convince me that a baby you're supposedly 8 weeks pregnant with is mine when the math doesn't add up." She grabbed the counter for support, her knuckles turning white. "You don't know what you're talking about. Pregnancies can be calculated differently. Maybe I ovulated late, or maybe you've been sleeping with someone else," I interrupted, my voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "Someone like your boss, perhaps? Richard Pembroke." The name hung in the air like poison. Victoria's reaction told me everything I needed to know. Her eyes widened, then narrowed, cycling through shock, guilt, and finally settling on defiance. "You're paranoid," she hissed. "Richard is a married man, a father of 3. He's my mentor, nothing more." I laughed bitterly. "A mentor who requires you to work late 3 nights a week? A mentor who texts you at midnight? A mentor whose wife called me last month asking if I knew where her husband was because he told her he was at a business dinner with my wife?" Victoria's face crumbled. "Daniel, please. How long?" I demanded. "How long have you been having an affair with him?" She sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face. "It's not what you think. It just happened. We were working on the Morrison account, spending so much time together. You were always busy with your own job, never home, never paying attention to me. So this is my fault." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You cheat on me, get pregnant by another man, and somehow I'm the villain." "The baby could still be yours," she insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. "We were together 4 months ago. It's possible." "It's not possible, and you know it." I moved to the kitchen drawer where I'd stored all the evidence I'd been collecting. Credit card statements showing hotel charges. Screenshots of text messages I'd recovered from our shared cloud account. Photos from her co-workers' social media showing Victoria and Richard at various events, their body language unmistakably intimate. I spread them across the table. Victoria stared at them, her face going from red to pale. "I was going to confront you eventually," I said quietly. "I just didn't expect you to add pregnancy to the list of betrayals." "What are you going to do?" she whispered. "I'm going to file for divorce," I stated firmly. "And I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth about you and Richard Pembroke." Victoria's tears stopped abruptly. "You wouldn't dare. Do you know what that would do to my career? To his family? Should have thought about that before you destroyed ours." She stood, anger replacing her tears. "If you try to divorce me, I'll tell everyone you're abandoning your pregnant wife. I'll make you look like a monster. No one will believe your conspiracy theories over a crying, expecting mother." "Then let them decide," I said, already pulling out my phone to call my lawyer. "Because I'm not raising another man's child, and I'm sure as hell not staying in this marriage another day." The next 2 weeks were a nightmare. Despite my ultimatum, Victoria refused to leave our house, claiming pregnancy gave her rights to the marital home. My lawyer, Bernard Hoffman, assured me we'd handle it through proper legal channels, but Victoria had other plans. She struck first on social media. I was at work when my phone started buzzing incessantly. Texts, emails, calls from friends and family I hadn't heard from in years. My assistant, Trevor, knocked on my office door with an unusual expression. Part sympathy, part curiosity. "Daniel, you need to see this," he said, handing me his tablet. There, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, Victoria had posted a lengthy statement with a photo of herself holding the pregnancy test, tears streaming down her face. "It breaks my heart to share this publicly, but I need support from those who truly care. My husband, Daniel, has abandoned me and our unborn child. After 5 years of marriage, the moment I told him we were expecting, he accused me of infidelity and filed for divorce. He's demanding I get rid of our baby or prove it's his through invasive testing that could harm our child. I never imagined the man I loved could be so cruel. To all the women out there facing similar situations, you're not alone. #stand by me #pregnant and abandoned #toxic masculinity." The post had already been shared hundreds of times. Comments poured in, overwhelmingly supportive of Victoria and damning of me. People I'd known for years were calling me heartless, a coward, a deadbeat father-to-be. My mother called, crying, "Daniel, how could you? That poor girl is carrying my grandchild. Mom, it's not my. I don't want to hear excuses. You need to go home and apologize to your wife immediately." Even my sister, usually my ally, sent a terse message, "Really disappointed in you right now. Call me when you're ready to explain yourself." At the office, whispers followed me through the hallways. My boss, Patricia Summers, called me into her office. "Daniel, I need to ask you directly, are the allegations your wife is making true?" "They're completely twisted," I said, exhausted. "She's the one who had an affair. The baby isn't mine, and I can prove it." Patricia frowned. "I believe you, but this is creating a hostile environment. Several employees have expressed concerns. I'm going to have to ask you to take some personal time while this gets sorted out." "You're suspending me." "I'm giving you paid leave to handle your personal affairs," she corrected. "But yes, until this media storm dies down, it's better if you're not in the office." I left the building feeling like a criminal. My phone continued buzzing with hateful messages from strangers who'd somehow gotten my number. Someone had started a petition to have me fired. Another person created a fake profile pretending to be me, posting misogynistic rants to further damage my reputation. Bernard called that evening. "Daniel, we need to talk strategy. Victoria's playing dirty, and it's working. Public opinion is crucifying you. What can I do? She's lying to everyone." "Then we expose the lies," Bernard said firmly. "We request a court-ordered prenatal paternity test. It's risky, there's a small chance of complications, but it's non-invasive. They just need blood samples from both of you and can test the fetal DNA. Will the court grant it?" Given your evidence of her affair and the timeline impossibility, yes. "But Daniel, when we do this, we need to go all in. We present everything, the affair, the boss, all of it. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Richard Pembroke, the man who destroyed my marriage. He was a senior vice president at Victoria's company, well respected, with a wife and 3 kids in private school. Exposing him would create shockwaves. "I'm prepared," I said. The court hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Victoria ramped up her campaign. She gave an interview to a local news station, crying about how pregnancy hormones made everything harder and how she couldn't understand why her husband had turned so cold. My attempts to defend myself on social media only made things worse. Every comment I made was screenshot, twisted, and used as further evidence of my cruelty. Then, 2 days before the hearing, I received an unexpected call from a woman named Diane Pembroke, Richard's wife. "Mr. Hartley, we need to talk about our spouses." Diane Pembroke sat across from me at a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. She was elegant, composed, but I could see the pain etched in the lines around her eyes. "I've known about Richard's affairs for years," she said quietly. "This isn't his first." I stared at her, processing this revelation. "Affairs? Plural?" She nodded. "At least 3 that I'm aware of, all with employees at his company. He has a pattern. Identifies ambitious young women, becomes their mentor, makes them dependent on him for career advancement, and then... She trailed off, her jaw tightening. And then he uses them. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I'm tired of protecting him, Diane said, finally meeting my eyes. And because your wife isn't the only pregnant mistress he's dealing with right now. The coffee shop seemed to tilt. What? Diane pulled out her phone and showed me a series of documents. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago. Richard has been involved with 3 women at his company simultaneously. Victoria is one. Another woman, Lauren Mitchell from accounting, is also pregnant, 7 weeks along. The third, Hannah Cross, ended her relationship with him 2 months ago when she found out about the others. My mind reeled. Does Victoria know about the others? I doubt it. Richard is very good at compartmentalizing. To each woman, she's the only one. The special one. The one he'd leave me for if circumstances were different. Diane's voice dripped with bitter sarcasm. Why haven't you divorced him? Prenuptial agreement heavily in his favor. And honestly, I was scared. Richard is powerful, vindictive. But watching what is letting happen to you, watching your wife destroy your reputation while he stays silent. She shook her head. I can't be complicit anymore. What are you proposing? I want to testify at your hearing, she said. I want to bring evidence of Richard's pattern of behavior. And I want to contact the other women. If we all come forward together, he can't bury this. Over the next 48 hours, Diane and I became unlikely partners. She connected me with Lauren Mitchell, who broke down crying when she learned about Victoria's pregnancy. He told me I was the only one, Lauren sobbed during our video call. He said his marriage was over, that he was just waiting for the right time to leave. When I told him I was pregnant, he offered to pay for an abortion. When I refused, he started avoiding me. Hannah Cross, the third woman, was angry rather than sad. Richard Pembroke is a predator, she stated bluntly. He used his position to manipulate me, made me think my career depended on keeping him happy. I'm willing to testify about everything. Bernard was ecstatic when I presented him with this new evidence. This changes everything. We're not just proving the baby isn't yours, we're exposing a pattern of workplace sexual misconduct. The company will have to respond. The day of the hearing arrived. I sat in the courtroom, Bernard beside me, as Victoria entered with her attorney, a shark named Jeffrey Krauser who specialized in making men look like villains in divorce proceedings. Victoria looked radiant in a maternity dress that emphasized her growing belly. She'd done her makeup to look both beautiful and vulnerable. Several of her friends and family members filled the gallery behind her, shooting daggers at me with their eyes. Then Diane Pembroke walked in, followed by Lauren Mitchell and Hannah Cross. Victoria's face went white. Judge Marianne Foster, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, called the court to order. We're here to address Mr. Hartley's petition for a prenatal paternity test. Mr. Krauser, your opening statement. Jeffrey stood, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, this is a transparent attempt by Mr. Hartley to avoid his responsibilities as a husband and father. He's demanding an invasive test that carries risks to both mother and child based solely on paranoid suspicions. Mrs. Hartley has been nothing but faithful, and these accusations are designed to... Your Honor, Bernard interrupted, if I may? The accusations Mr. Krauser dismisses as paranoid have substantial evidence behind them. Evidence we'd like to present to the court. Judge Foster nodded. Proceed. Bernard methodically laid out our case. The timeline showing the impossibility of my paternity. The credit card statements. The text messages. Photos from social media. Then he introduced Diane Pembroke. Mrs. Pembroke, please state your relationship to this case, Bernard prompted. I'm the wife of Richard Pembroke, the man who impregnated Mrs. Hartley, Diane said clearly. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Jeffrey jumped up. Objection. This is hearsay and irrelevant too. It's directly relevant, Judge Foster cut him off. Continue, Mrs. Pembroke. Diane detailed everything. Richard's pattern of affairs. The private investigator's findings. The existence of not one but two pregnant mistresses. Then Lauren Mitchell testified, tears streaming down her face as she described how Richard had pursued her, made promises, and then abandoned her when the pregnancy became inconvenient. Victoria sat frozen, her face cycling through emotions: shock, betrayal, rage, and finally, a dawning horror as she realized the truth. After Lauren's testimony, Judge Foster called for a recess. I watched Victoria practically flee the courtroom, her mother and sister rushing after her. Through the partially open door, I could hear raised voices. "You told me it was love." Victoria's mother shouted. "You said he was going to leave his wife." "He was." Victoria sobbed. "He promised me." "This is all lies, some conspiracy Daniel set up to." "Wake up, Victoria," her sister snapped. "You're one of 3 mistresses. 3. And you're not even the only pregnant one." Bernard touched my shoulder. "We need to prepare for the next session. Jeffrey's going to try something desperate." He was right. When court resumed, Jeffrey had transformed his strategy entirely. "Your Honor," he began, his voice now conciliatory rather than aggressive. "In light of the testimony we've heard, my client wishes to acknowledge that there may have been a misunderstanding about the paternity of her child. However, she maintains that she believed in good faith that her husband could be the father due to the timing of their last intimate encounter." "Mr. Krauser," Judge Foster said dryly, "are you withdrawing your objection to the paternity test?" "We are, Your Honor. However, we request that the court consider Mrs. Hartley's vulnerable position. She's pregnant, facing public humiliation, and her career is now in jeopardy. We ask that any settlement in the divorce proceedings take into account her mental anguish and—" "Mr. Krauser," the judge interrupted, "this hearing is specifically about the paternity test. We'll address divorce settlement terms separately. Mr. Hartley, you're requesting a non-invasive prenatal paternity test." "Yes, Your Honor," Bernard confirmed. "Granted. The court orders both parties to submit to testing within the next week. Now, there's another matter I want to address." Judge Foster's expression hardened. "The evidence presented today suggests serious workplace misconduct occurring at Pembroke Industries. Mrs. Pembroke, have you filed any complaints with the company's Human Resources Department?" Diane stood. "No, Your Honor. I wanted to ensure I had solid evidence before approaching them." "I'm going to recommend that you do so immediately. Additionally, I'm ordering the court records of this hearing to be made available to the State Labor Board. If what's been described constitutes a pattern of sexual harassment using position power, that's a matter for regulatory authorities." Over the next week, everything exploded. The paternity test was conducted. I received the results before Victoria did. Bernard had them sent directly to his office. He called me immediately. "Daniel, it's confirmed. You're not the father. The fetal DNA doesn't match yours at all." I felt a wave of relief so intense I had to sit down. "And Richard?" "We don't have his DNA yet, but given the circumstantial evidence, I'd say it's a certainty." The official results were submitted to the court 2 days later. By then, the story had leaked to the media. Not from us. I suspected Diane had shared information with a journalist friend, but suddenly, local news was reporting on the Pembroke Industries scandal. Richard Pembroke issued a statement through his attorney denying all allegations and claiming the women were engaged in a coordinated attack to extort money from him. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Hannah Cross, who'd been silent during the hearing, held a press conference. She presented emails, text messages, and voice recordings of Richard making promises, discussing covering up the affairs, and even threatening her career when she tried to end the relationship. "Richard Pembroke is not a victim," Hannah stated calmly into the cameras. "He's a predator who used his power to manipulate and exploit employees. I'm speaking out so that no other woman at Pembroke Industries, or anywhere else, has to endure what we did." The company's board of directors held an emergency meeting. Richard was placed on immediate administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Victoria's social media presence, once filled with sympathetic supporters, turned toxic. People who'd championed her cause now felt betrayed and stupid. The comments section of her posts became brutal. "You lied to us. We defended you and you made us look like fools. How many other things did you lie about?" She deleted all her accounts within 24 hours. My own reputation began to recover, though the damage wasn't completely undone. Trevor from my office sent me articles where journalists were now questioning why they'd rushed to judgment, examining how quickly social media pioneers could destroy innocent people. Patricia called to invite me back to work. "Daniel, I owe you an apology. We should have trusted you." "You did what you thought was necessary," I said, though her words meant more than she knew. The divorce proceedings moved quickly after the paternity results. Victoria, through Jeffrey, attempted to argue for significant alimony based on emotional distress. Bernard shut it down efficiently. "Your Honor, Mrs. Hartley committed adultery, deliberately attempted to deceive her husband about paternity, and launched a public campaign to destroy his reputation. She's entitled to nothing beyond what's legally required for marital asset division." Judge Foster agreed. The settlement gave Victoria her car, half of our savings, and that was it. The house, which I'd owned before the marriage, remained mine. She had 30 days to vacate. But the story wasn't over yet. 1 week before Victoria's move-out date, Diane Pembroke called me again. "Daniel, I thought you should know. The company's investigation concluded. They're firing Richard. And Lauren, Hannah, and I are filing a joint civil lawsuit against both Richard and Pembroke Industries for sexual harassment, hostile work environment, and emotional distress." "What about Victoria?" I asked. "That's why I'm calling. We want to know if she'd be willing to join the lawsuit." I hadn't spoken to Victoria since the court hearing. Our communication had gone through attorneys exclusively. But Diane's question lingered in my mind. Would Victoria join the lawsuit against Richard? Did she deserve the opportunity? I called Bernard for advice. "Legally, she has every right to sue," he said. "Richard's actions toward her appear to fit the same pattern as the others. But Daniel, this is your decision. If you're not comfortable with it—" "No," I interrupted. "It's not about my comfort. It's about whether she understands what Richard actually did to her." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet Victoria one last time. We met at a neutral location, a park bench near the courthouse. She was visibly pregnant now, nearly 5 months along, and looked exhausted. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I know you have no reason to help me." "Diane Pembroke wants to include you in the lawsuit against Richard," I said, cutting straight to the point. "She thinks you were victimized the same way Lauren and Hannah were." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Victimized? Daniel, I knew Richard was married. I made a choice." "Did you know about Lauren and Hannah?" I asked. "Did you know he was sleeping with multiple employees simultaneously? Did you know he had no intention of leaving Diane, that he's done this before?" She was quiet for a long moment. "No. He told me I was different. Special. That his marriage had been dead for years, that he was just waiting for his youngest to graduate high school before filing for divorce." She wiped her eyes. "I was so stupid." "You were manipulated," I corrected, surprising myself. "He identified your ambitions, your vulnerabilities, and exploited them. That doesn't excuse what you did to me, but it doesn't mean he didn't wrong you too." Victoria looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Why are you being kind to me? I destroyed everything." "Because hating you won't undo what happened," I said. "And because that baby you're carrying deserves better than parents consumed by bitterness. Even if I'm not the father." She broke down then, crying in a way I'd never seen. Not the manipulative tears from her social media posts, but genuine, soul-deep grief. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "My career is over. No one will hire me after this scandal. My family barely speaks to me. And I'm going to be a single mother to a baby whose father wants nothing to do with either of us." "Join the lawsuit," I said firmly. "Hold Richard accountable. Get compensation that can help you rebuild your life and support your child. And Victoria, get therapy. Real therapy, to figure out how you ended up here." Over the next 3 months, Victoria did join the lawsuit. The 4 women together presented a devastating case against Richard Pembroke and Pembroke Industries. The company, desperate to avoid a lengthy trial and more negative publicity, settled for an undisclosed but substantial amount. Richard's personal assets were also targeted, forcing him to liquidate investments and property. Diane divorced him, and the prenuptial agreement that had once protected him became less relevant when evidence of his misconduct during the marriage came to light. She walked away with majority custody of their children and a fair settlement. Richard himself became a pariah. His career was finished. His reputation destroyed. Several industry groups revoked memberships and awards. He tried to start a consulting firm, but no one would work with him. Victoria used her settlement money to move to another state, where she had family support. She gave birth to a daughter and, from what I heard through mutual acquaintances, was actually getting the therapy I'd suggested. Richard had signed away all parental rights, preferring to pretend the child didn't exist rather than face another reminder of his downfall. My own divorce was finalized 6 months after that first court hearing. I kept my job, rebuilt my reputation slowly, and learned to trust again, though it would be a long process. A year after everything ended, I received a letter from Victoria. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter. "Daniel, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I want you to know that I understand now what I did. The affair, the lies, the public humiliation I put you through, none of it was about you. It was about my own insecurities, my willingness to believe a man who told me what I wanted to hear, my cowardice in not facing our marital problems honestly. You deserved so much better. I hope you find someone who gives you the love and respect you always showed me, even when I didn't deserve it. I'm working on becoming someone my daughter can be proud of. Thank you for pushing me toward that path, even when I hated you for it. V." I read the letter twice, then filed it away. Some part of me appreciated the acknowledgement, but I had no interest in maintaining contact. That chapter of my life was closed. The real satisfaction came from watching the broader impact of the case. Pembroke Industries implemented sweeping policy changes regarding workplace relationships and power dynamics. Other companies in the industry followed suit. Hannah Cross became an advocate for workplace harassment victims, speaking at conferences and helping draft legislation. Lauren Mitchell started a support group for women who'd been manipulated by powerful men in professional settings. She invited me to speak once, about the experience from a spouse's perspective. I declined initially but eventually agreed. It was harder than I expected, reliving those months of gaslighting and public vilification, but also cathartic. The hardest part, I told the group, was watching someone I loved choose to destroy me rather than admit the truth. But I learned that someone else's choices, no matter how much you love them, don't define your worth. 2 years after the divorce, I met someone new. Cassandra was a veterinarian, divorced herself, with a wary but kind heart. We took things slowly, building trust brick by brick. She knew my whole story. I'd learned the hard way that honesty from the beginning was the only foundation worth building on. "Do you regret marrying Victoria?" Cassandra asked me once, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset. I thought about it carefully. I regret the pain. I regret the time lost. But I don't regret the lessons. I know who I am now in a way I didn't before. I know what I'll accept and what I won't. I know the difference between love and manipulation. "That's a hard-won wisdom," she said softly. "The hardest," I agreed. The story of my cheating wife who got pregnant by her boss and expected me to raise the baby became, for a while, a cautionary tale shared in certain circles. People used it as an example of why you should trust your instincts, why you should demand truth even when it's uncomfortable, why you should never let public opinion override your own knowledge of your situation. But for me, it became something else entirely. It became the story of how I found my backbone, stood up for truth even when the world called me a liar, and ultimately rebuilt a life I could be proud of. The baby that started it all, Victoria's daughter, would grow up never knowing me. That was right. I wasn't her father, and pretending otherwise would have benefited no one. But I hoped Victoria kept her promise to become someone her daughter could be proud of. Every child deserved that, even one born from such tangled, painful circumstances. As for Richard Pembroke, last I heard he was living in a different state, working a middle management position under an assumed professional name. His children had changed their surnames to their mother's maiden name. The empire he'd built through manipulation and exploitation had crumbled, and he'd become exactly what he deserved to be, forgotten. Justice, I learned, isn't always swift. But when it comes, when truth finally outweighs lies and consequences catch up to actions, it's worth the wait. I stood on my porch that evening with Cassandra, my past behind me and my future full of possibility, and I finally understood what it meant to be free.